I would like to now call on Engineer Chidi Izuwah, who is going to look at the topic from a regulatory and public sector lens. Engineer Izuwah is a former university lecturer in fluid mechanics, fluvial hydraulics, and hydropower engineering. He has held several senior oil and gas asset management positions in a career spanning over 21 years with SPDC and Shell International. Engineer Izuwah is the Director General and the Chief Executive Officer of the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission in Nigeria. He's currently the chair, and he chairs the Presidential Committee on Infrastructure and PPPs and the Nigerian Society of Engineers. So, Engineer Izuwah, welcome. Unmute yourself, please. You have to unmute, yeah.
I have done that. I mean, we can spend a week talking about infrastructure, and we're not going to finish because of the challenges we face. So how much time do I have?
You have 15 minutes.
Okay, now, what I would do is, I'll probably try to do 4 things, very quickly. The first one is to talk about what's happening now. And I think because of a bit of what I've heard, it's extremely very important to establish the legal and regulatory framework for PPPs in Nigeria so that we have a common understanding of what we're doing. Talk about the things we have done and what the future, looks like. I don't want to go into the deficit and how much money is needed and all of that stuff, because we all see it. I mean, we feel the deficit of infrastructure every day in our country. In fact, there's a place His Excellency the President talks about. He said, if we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria. Then he asked me to speak. I said, Your Excellency, I agree. If we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria. But also, if we don't kill our infrastructure deficit, the deficit, in fact, is already killing us. Because people don't have, you have people having surgeries, power goes up and somebody dies. So it's just to sort of put things for you. But just to, there was a very interesting seminar we had yesterday, and I've sent the YouTube, clip to Kede, and I think you can share it through your network. The work we're doing about debt capital management, trying to establish, a local debt capital market in Nigeria to fund infrastructure. We also discuss a lot of these issues. So it's something that people will gain a lot of knowledge from watching. Then secondly, for those who are interested in doing PPPs in Nigeria, the NMPC, we've been working very closely with them. The NMPC just this morning advertised her pipeline network and depot, for pre-qualification for public-private partnerships. We're going through the first phase of it. So people who are interested, I've also sent the ad back. It's in today's Daily Trust in Nigeria. I've sent it together, also share. The copy I sent is not a very good one, but I'll try and send a better copy so people know that things are happening. But just to sort of step back a little bit, I'd like to talk about the regulatory framework. The framework for PPPs in Nigeria is principally around the ICRC Act and the National Policy on PPPs. And of PPPs, we see a public-private partnership as a contractual agreement. Mark that word, contractual agreement between a public agency, federal, state, or local, and a private sector entity. Through this agreement, the skills and assets of each sector, public and private, are shared in delivering a service or facility for the use of the general public. In addition to sharing the resources, each party shares in the risks and rewards potential in the delivery of the service or facility. This wasn't a natural definition for us. It's a definition from the National Council of PPPs in the US, but because of its holistic nature, we basically adopted it. Now, PPPs in Nigeria, go through the national policy defines a framework that involves development, procurement, and implementation. So every PPP in Nigeria would have to go through largely, those three processes. When you develop it, you have a bankable business case. So you convince yourself that for this particular venture you have, if you go out there, you would have enough information in your data room to demonstrate to the private sector that this is a viable business opportunity. If you bring in capital, to develop this service, the revenues will be sufficient to pay both debt and equity and provide, returns, to the investors. Now, that's the beginning point. You've got an OPC, which the ICRC certified. Then you go through a competitive procurement process that tries to drive, value for money. And then once you finish that particular process, you prepare what is called a full business case. That full business case, by law, has to go to cabinet for approval. It's only when a PPP, the contract agreement and the full business case contain the is approved by cabinet that you're able to get into a PPP. Something that doesn't go through that process by our legal framework does not constitute a public-private partnership. That's a very important thing, to be very clear about and understand. We also allow people to put in what is called unsolicited proposals. And in fact, in our framework here, in terms of the guidelines we have issued, we have moved away from playing the unsolicited. Because when you say something is unsolicited, it has a bit of some sort of negative, connotation, as if it's an unsolicited telephone call or stuff like that. We call them privately initiated infrastructure proposals. That a private party goes somewhere, sees an opportunity, and makes the proposal to government. Now, what that process requires us to do is that government will, the primary thing there is that you demonstrate that you've developed this opportunity. There's a bankable business case. Government looks at the viability. If government accepts that a viable thing, then you get an option of first refusal. It is taken through a switch challenge process, which is competitive, and then basically makes that process compliant with the law. However, into that process, the original proponent has the right to match any competitive offers if it's not the most competitive. Then that still goes to cabinet for approval. That process is very, very I really would not like to start a discussion by contradicting what another panelist has said, but this is extremely very important because this is part of the reason why Nigeria would have a bad name somewhere. I think Francis talked about an MRO and a minister signing an agreement and an MOU and stuff like that. I'm a bit worried, Francis, and I think we probably need to have a chat after this because that's not the process of PPPs in Nigeria. And what would happen is that once this MOU and agreement is signed, another minister comes in and says, no, I don't know anything about this. This doesn't comply with the law. And then our country will have a bad name. So, what I have here, and I think I can share, this is the court process of where we're going to do exactly the same thing here. So please, for the MRO, there's an aviation set of projects in the aviation sector. Is the MRO, the aviation leasing company, the concession of the airport terminals, cargo terminals, and I know what stages where they are. For the MRO, we have basically the MRO, there is a competitive bid that is out, where people will go through that process. So I think that, the question is that it's extremely very important that whatever we do complies with the law so that you have the full faith and credit of the Nigerian people behind that transaction. And if anything happens, that transaction has the full backing of the law. So I think that we probably need to have another, people are very welcome. Like you said, the only MROs in Africa is in Morocco and in Abyss. And it's a very expensive thing because of the D-check requirements. You can only do ABC checks in Nigeria. You cannot do, and those things are very expensive. It costs about half to $1 million for every airline to do. It's very expensive. So it makes a lot of sense to have an MRO in Nigeria serving the West African region. But if you want to do it as a sole risk investment, you do it like that. But if it is got to be a PPP, it's got to follow the PPP framework. So that's about that. But looking at what, the landscape for PPPs, I would recommend that people find time and go to the ICRC website, www.icrc.gov.ng. If you look at that, go to our PPP disclosure portal. We are the first country in the world, and the World Bank is recognized us to have a PPP disclosure portal. So everything about our PPPs, the contracts are fully well disclosed on that particular. And you will see we currently have about 70 transactions, which are running as PPPs, approved by cabinet, validated and running, very well. A good examples of them is like our port terminals. 26 of our port terminals are public-private partnerships, concession to private terminal operators. And I mean, the success has been unbelievable. It's not our ports are perfect, but we have problems with the ports, but they have to do with, common user infrastructure outside the ports, access to the ports, but not in terms of what the concessionaires are required, to provide. We also have the three hydro power plants, Aindi, Deba, Shiroro. Those are, concessions. And a number of other, facilities are called. I mean, a good one that we have done, which Nigeria has done, that no one else is doing. I mean, normally, social infrastructure activities are done on annuity. Gariki Hospital in Abuja here is a concession. And it's probably the only concession in the world that is on a user fee basis. Because of the fiscal space that government doesn't have, government is unable to pay, because if you go to the UK, you got PFIs, for hospitals and everything, and then government pays availability payments, on a facility basis. But here, this is a concession that runs on a user, the only one of it anywhere in the world. There are lots of other, transactions that are being run, like that. What is the future for us in PPPs? The future for us is that Nigeria has got a massive, infrastructure deficit. And we are just about starting the Highway Development Management Initiative, where we're going to be concessioning 10 of our roads, to the private sector. That particular process is ongoing. We're concluding the business case. Once it's concluded, we will go through a competitive process that will, those concessions will depend to get their revenue, both on tolling and also land value. So we're looking at a well spread. So it's all part of the business case that we have done that mitigate the risk of that transaction. You're looking at the diversity of sources for revenue to make it. One of the recent things that we have done is a Lake Deepwater Port. Lake Deepwater Port is a very successful private partnership approved by China. That is $2 billion of investment coming in.
You're getting a bit. We can't hear you. It's getting muted.
No, it's not.
We can't hear you if you can. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I think there's something with my microphone in terms of.
So you have to stand where you have to speak. Stay where you
I
are.
have to face it to be able to. I should have used my super duper computer. I'm sorry about that. So I'll try
better.
to.
Just like that. Just like that.
Yeah. Okay. So if you look at Lake Deepwater Port that we have, the things that we have done with Gurara, Gurara Power Station. So there are, I mean, just to give, we have, but the key point to note is that what we have done is not enough. We still have a huge infrastructure deficit. And I think the other point I also want to make is that what ICRC is doing is also focusing on federal infrastructure. So a lot of effort is being made by us to sort of draw attention to state infrastructure, to draw attention to local government infrastructure in terms of what will, I mean, like something like primary health care. One of the initiatives we're driving now is the use of mobile medical clinics on a PPP basis to improve primary health care across the country. So you're going to have it. This has been worked very successfully in India. So we're looking at, replicating that model in Nigeria. And what I keep saying to people that if we had this 5 years ago, we will certainly be in a better place, to deal with COVID-19. Because what happens is that very rapidly, working with the private sector, you could transform those things into COVID, testing centers. And the sort of low testing figures you have will not be here because we would be able to spread COVID testing around the country and have better control, on what is happening. We're also looking at students' hostels. We've just had the first approval for student hostel PPP in Kaduna Polytechnic. So that is something that I know many of you went to your universities in Nigeria. You don't want to go to the hostels where you spent, you don't want to go to your hostels in Uniben. You don't want to go to your hostels in Nsukka. What they look like, you won't put animals into them now. But people who would rule Nigeria in the future are required to do that. So we're working very hard with the Federal Ministry of Education and the National Universities Commission and the individual universities to bring in private capital, because that's a very bankable transaction, that you can bring in private capital and work. So across social, across economic, across the various sectors, Nigeria is a very attractive, venue for PPPs. But we do have a few challenges. One of those challenges we have is the time. There's a time issue because we have left our infrastructure, deficit to pile up too much. You require time to do, a bankability study. You require time for a competitive, because people comply with, Equator principles. No lender, will lend you money when it is not sure of the procurement process and the governance principle, just like Izuwah has said. So to set up all of that and do it properly and create a transaction that meets international standards requires time. The point is, if you're telling somebody whose road is very bad that you require 1 year to do an investment-grade traffic study, is he going to listen to you? If you tell a politician who has only 4 years that you require 5 years to procure a PPP transaction, is he going to listen to you? So that is one area that we need to do. Another area we need to do is also the lack of capacity in the public sector. Experienced, knowledgeable people. PPPs are complex legal, technical, financial arrangements. They do not very easily amend themselves to self-help. It's not something you can do under the corner. I mean, you're competing with investors who have gone to Harvard and anything. You must meet those type of standards. So what we have done in ICROC is that we have established the Nigeria Institute for Infrastructure and Public-Private Partnerships to rapidly spool up the skill and capacity of public servants in Nigeria and also the private sector, for PPPs in Nigeria. Another big issue we have is also project development funding. Trying to carry out bankability studies is very expensive. And we don't really have a project development package that is able to do. So we're looking at how to solve, that. We also have issues with contingent liability and our sovereign rating, and also the total lack of long-term tenure financing in Nigeria, because, it's not, I mean, when you look at things like airports and port infrastructure that earn revenue in foreign currency, it's not a problem to borrow FX to do those infrastructure. But if you're looking at roads, hospital, where the revenues for the investor comes in Naira, if you bring in the money from outside, then you're drawing huge risk in terms of FX. So we need to make the effort to develop our own debt capital market so that we can use Naira to finance our infrastructure. We need to deepen it. We're not going to finance infrastructure with 90-day money in the bank. We need to create that ecosystem. I think that is the key word. There is a lot of effort that ICRC is doing to create an ecosystem that can power PPPs. There are no limits to what an investor can do, because that is why these things have to go to council. Because once it goes to council, and because everything has to go to council, the investment required, the returns and everything. So once it's approved by council, it is cast in stone. And nobody can, if you look at the ICRC Act is very, very clear about the sanctity of contracts, for PPPs in Nigeria. So whatever, I mean, the returns will go to cabinet. It is left to cabinet to say that the return is too much or not. So once you have that, you have the protection of the those are really the few points I wanted. The last point I just want to say is that we have not developed a framework for emergency PPP. So some of the PPPs we require in Nigeria will not take the time that you require to develop a normal PPP. A good example is we are working with the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 to establish rapidly COVID testing at airports in Nigeria. If we don't do that, we are going to be unable, to allow international flights in Nigeria. This is going to be a PPP. We don't have months to do it. We don't have years to do it. We only have weeks to do it. So it's a call for us to be able to do that and still tick all the boxes that you're required to say that this was a properly done PPP, approved properly. It's able to raise the capital to do it and provide a quality service that creates comfort in Nigerians that if people fly into Nigeria, they will be tested properly to demonstrate that they are not COVID infected, and then everybody feels comfort to travel to the airport. So those are a scenario of things that we're doing to drive. Without infrastructure, like John F. Kennedy says, he says, America has good roads, not because America is rich. America is rich because it has good roads. Without infrastructure, our country is going nowhere. So infrastructure emergency we have is something that all of us need to put our effort on.
Thank you very much. A few things to really think about. What you said is that things are going on, but there are quite a few that is very attractive. The market is very attractive in Nigeria, and that we are ready for PPP, but there are challenges with time to do bankable projects or bankability studies. That you've got, Nigeria has got a massive infrastructure gap. We don't have enough, we still have a huge infrastructure deficit. A lot of work is being done to draw focus on infrastructure using a model from India. And you gave example of student hostels, that there is viability in that. You also talked about a lack of capacity in the public sector, that you've established an institute for public servants in Nigeria. That there's also project development funding. There's a challenge with that, and that there's lack of long-term tenure financing in Nigeria, but that we should make efforts to develop funding in-house and to develop an ecosystem. I think there was some kind of break in communication when you were talking. You also talked about something about development of a framework. Quite a lot of things to talk about. And I'm glad that we have different speakers speaking from different lenses. Nigeria is huge. There's huge population, infrastructure. There's deficit in infrastructure. So the market is huge. However, there are challenges with bankability, with research.